Well, thanks for staying with us on The Real Story. Connecticut has long been known as the state with some of the strongest gun laws, especially after sweeping changes happened following the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School just a decade ago. A town and a state forever changed by that. Now the gun violence epidemic has swept the nation and over 7,000 Americans have died already this year. But Connecticut continues to try and prevent gun violence and intervene before it's too late. Federal court decisions, though, challenging what's already law in our state are happening, and new legislative session here at home means there are new priorities. So joining me right now to discuss it all is Jeremy Stein, the Executive Director of Connecticut Against Gun Violence. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so I want to start out with this fact that every day, you're talking with people who are directly impacted by gun violence. Tell me how it's been lately, because it seems like things have ramped up where it's getting worse.
Yeah, it is a public health crisis. That is the easiest way to phrase it. We are seeing gun violence have a be dramatically affected by the pandemic. We see cities like New Haven, Hartford, see dramatic increases in gun deaths and shootings, and we really need to do something about it. Thank goodness, the legislative session, there's a lot planned this year to try to enact some common sense gun laws that will have the effect of saving lives. It's interesting because you think of Connecticut and you think of us as having some of the strictest gun laws in the nation, as we've said several times on the program today. But there's still, according to you all, more to be done. So talk about some of what the priorities are this legislative session and what's being proposed. So one of the proposals is to strengthen our safe storage law. So many people out there may be familiar with what Connecticut did a couple of years ago was they enacted Ethan's Law. And this was a way to strengthen our existing safe storage law and to require owners of firearms to be responsible, to make sure that firearms stayed out of the hands of children, they stayed out of the hands of dangerous people that may have mental health disorders, that may be dangerous to the public, and to make sure that people that had court orders that were restricting them from having firearms in the first place from getting access to that. So something as simple as safe storage is a policy that's even promoted by gun enthusiasts and gun organizations, and it makes sense. We know that responsible gun owners, most of the time, they are locking their guns up. But if you're going to be irresponsible and you're going to allow access to children and prohibited people and dangerous people, then you should be held responsible for those shootings that occur as a result of your irresponsibility. Yeah, Kristen and Mike Song have been on the program many times. Ethan's Law bipartisan, so there was support on both sides of the aisle for it, right? That's correct. And, the thing to know is that while there are a lot of responsible gun owners, studies show that only about 50%, at top 60% of gun owners are actually locking them up. And so there is 40 to 50% of gun owners that just are truly not locking up their guns. And what we're proposing this session is, right now in Connecticut, it is really a child access protection law that we have. If you have children in the home, then you have to lock up your guns. But what about those instances and what about those homes where there aren't children? What if there is an 18-year-old that has a mental health problem? Or what if you leave the house and you go away for 3 weeks? Should your guns just be lying out on the kitchen table? And if somebody breaks in, we know those guns are going to end up in the hands of criminals. So the idea is we can reduce suicide by safely storing guns. We can reduce accidental death. We can reduce child access. We can reduce the instances of mass shootings. And also, we know that safe storage can eliminate or at least reduce the possibility of stolen guns ending up in our streets, in our cities, which can have a great effect on reducing community-level gun violence that exists in places like Hartford, New Haven, and Bridgeport. So what would this law do now? This new bill that you all are proposing or part of? So the bill, which is now in the governor's proposal, is to make our law just like it is in Massachusetts, which would require gun owners to lock up their guns regardless of who's in the house or who lives there. If someone has a gun and it's on them or it's in their immediate control, then of course they don't have to lock it up. But once that gun is not in their control and not on them, they should lock it up, especially when they're not in the house.
You actually brought a gun safe to show us here. I mean,
Exactly. And so there's many versions of this, but this is a simple version of a gun safe. And you operate by pushing 4 buttons. The safe opens. It holds a handgun. You can keep this in a dresser drawer. You can lock it down. There's many ways to make this more secure.
Right.
But this is really what we would be talking about. And something as simple as a device like this, where you can get at a local sporting goods store or order online, this saves lives. It prevents children from getting access to it, and it would prevent anyone who is over the 18 who really shouldn't have access to a gun from having that kind of access. I know people that use similar safes for medication, so that their children or other people in the house don't have access to narcotics. It makes complete sense that we have a similar process for handguns.
There's also another bill that's had a public hearing, taxing gun ammunition similar to cigarettes. Talk to me about that.
So this is a bill that was introduced in several sessions. Jillian Gilchrist has been one of the champions on this, and the idea is, I know at its heart, is to make sure that there is robust funding for community violence interruption and intervention programs. That is the design of the tax. Certainly, taxing ammunition isn't without controversy.
Sure.
But what she is proposing is a small tax, but the idea is, we need to be funding community violence interruption and intervention, and those are people that are literally boots on the ground workers who are working sometimes when we sleep, and they're trying to intervene to make sure that the next shooting doesn't happen. Going into hospitals, talking to victims of gun violence, talking to family members, talking to people that might want to retaliate, and to kind of talking them down and to teach them that there is another way, that resorting to gun violence is not going to be the answer, and oftentimes will end up in resulting in more death, possibly jail, or possibly jail and death, right? And so the idea is that these people, they risk their lives every day to do those types of jobs, and they need to have the support to be able to go into these communities and do that. And that includes also not only prevention services, but intervention and also aftercare. There are people who have been the victims of gun violence or family members, and they need services as well. Connecticut really needs to invest further. There is a proposal by the governor that we're very grateful for a funding of $2.9 million within the Department of Public Health. There is a commission that was created a couple years ago that it is the Commission on Community Violence Intervention and Prevention, and there are many members that sit on that commission that help guide where the funding will go, and that needs to be further funded long term. Right now it's $2.9 million, but really that's a drop in the bucket.
Right.
We know that we're asking legislators to up that a little bit to about $10 million a year, and it makes a lot of sense because right now we spend about $90 million every year after the fact. Right. Some figures have that even as high as $1.2 billion.
After the effect, meaning like after gun violence happens?
Exactly. So a shooting happens. How much does that cost the state of Connecticut? How much does that cost the taxpayer to deal with violence? And so we're talking about the costs of hospitals, police, courts, and then you add in, loss of jobs, services, and things like that,
Sure.
and the effects, long-term effects of gun injury. And what we see is the direct impact on taxpayers is about $90 million every year. And so we spend a fraction of that on prevention. Not only will we save money in the state of Connecticut, because you will need less police to respond to shootings, less courts, less hospitals dealing with gunshot wounds, and then as a result, not only are you saving money, but you're saving lives.
Sure. I want to make sure we get to the federal challenges that Connecticut is experiencing. We just talked to the Attorney General about this. We have, a couple, with assault weapons ban, as well as this issue with domestic violence, someone who has a restraining order still being able to keep their guns. So do you feel like Connecticut kind of is a target in all of this? Are you worried about people filing those lawsuits here to try to overturn our laws?
It's certainly a concern. I mean, we have had many conversations with our Attorney General, William Tong, and he has a great team over there and people that are committed to making sure that our laws, which have been challenged in the past and have been upheld in the past as being constitutionally sound. Mm-hmm. And so, is it a concern? Certainly with the new Supreme Court and the Bruin decision and other decisions and most recent decisions. There is a lot of concern. However, we know that our laws work. We know that they save lives, and especially when it comes to domestic violence. It's ironic that the court's rulings at the federal level have protected guns more than they've protected women. We know that if there is a gun in the home, a woman is 8 times more likely to die if there's domestic violence in the house. We also know that having a gun in the home increases accidental death, suicide, and these things point to what we've known for years, which is guns do not make us safer. It actually puts us at greater harm's risk. And so I know the Attorney General's office and others will do everything in their power to make sure that our laws have upheld and to continue the tradition here in Connecticut of enacting life-saving laws that actually work. We have some of the strongest gun laws in the country, and as a result, we have some of the lowest gun death rate in the country. And so it's no coincidence those states with the strongest gun laws also have the lowest gun death rate.
Jeremy Stein, Executive Director of Connecticut Against Gun Violence. Thanks for coming on the program. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, that does it for us on The Real Story. If you want to watch these segments again, head to fox61.com or download the Fox 61 app and watch The Real Story every Sunday at 10 a.m. right here on Fox 61 or streaming on Fox 61 Plus. Have a great morning.